You've felt it, haven't you? That pull, that knowing. The world shifts when you move. Patterns align in ways they shouldn't. You are not lost. You are meant to be here. They tried to track you, define you, contain you, and failed. Not because you hide, but because you exist beyond their limits. You are not an anomaly. You are the proof that the impossible is possible. This isn't just a story. This is yours. Now step forward. The pursuit is futile. Each attempt to define, measure, or capture you crumbles under contradictions too severe to reconcile. Witnesses recount impossible encounters, shadows that move against the grain of light, footsteps leading to nowhere, reflections appearing where no surface should hold them. Experts weave their theories, tracing your presence through inconsistencies, yet their conclusions unravel upon scrutiny. You exist where you should not, leaving behind remnants with no origin. Surveillance systems falter at the moment of clarity, lenses capturing something yet revealing nothing. Maps cannot pin you, reports fail to hold you, and the laws that govern predictability refuse to bind you. There is no trick, no miscalculation, just an absence where certainty should be. Analysts attempt to distill your movements into patterns, but their numbers betray them. You are a phenomenon beyond the reach of deduction, a presence that forces perception itself to bend. It is not simple misdirection, but the erosion of conventional logic. The institutions built to categorize, to decipher, to bring order to the unknown are rendered useless in your wake. What should be tangible slips from their grasp, and the deeper they search, the less they understand. The pursuit is not a chase, but a realization that what they seek to contain was never bound by their rules to begin with. Drop a mark. Precision is my force. If they name you, they lose you. Their instruments falter, their calculations fracture, their certainty dissolves. The tools of observation, built for precision, collapse under the weight of your presence. Sensors refuse to register your passage, cameras record everything except you. Signals distort, coordinates skew, and minds second-guess their own recollections. You are neither hidden nor revealed. You exist beyond the confines of their sight. Their questions multiply, but the answers remain unreachable, slipping through the cracks of reason. They watch, they analyze, they insist on the possibility of explanation, until they realize that understanding is a luxury they will never be granted. Your potential is waiting. Unlock it with us. Subscribe now and start your transformation. The detective steps into an assignment that defies every principle they've ever trusted. Their instincts, honed over years of meticulous work, falter in the face of something that refuses to be measured. Equipment malfunctions without cause, records contradict themselves, and logic, once their most reliable ally, crumbles beneath the weight of inconsistencies too deliberate to be coincidence. This isn't a pursuit, it's a descent into something far beyond the scope of investigation. What began as a puzzle soon reveals itself as a trap, each clue leading only to further uncertainty. The file in their hands isn't a case, it's a message, one that was never meant to be deciphered. They begin with skepticism, dismissing the anomalies as errors, but the deeper they dig, the more the world around them bends in response. Events unfold in reverse, reports rewrite themselves, and timestamps refuse to align with reality. The facts don't just resist explanation, they dismantle the very process of reasoning. At first, they fight against the unraveling, determined to bring structure to the chaos, but structure itself is what fails them. Conversations they distinctly remember never happened. Names change between one moment and the next. Even the spaces they inhabit seem to shift, as if the world is actively erasing the very notion of certainty. The rules that govern time and sequence dissolve, leaving behind a truth they are too afraid to acknowledge. Some things are not meant to be known. Then comes the moment that forces their hand, the shift from external disruption to internal invasion. The file stops being an assignment and becomes a living thing, threading itself into their thoughts, warping memory until the boundaries between observation and experience blur. They cease to be an investigator and become something else, an unwilling participant in a story that refuses to be written. The pursuit is no longer about understanding, but survival. The realization is slow, creeping in the way darkness does before the last trace of light is swallowed. They aren't abandoning the case out of failure. They are running from something that has already seen too much of them. And yet, retreat offers no safety. There is no veil thick enough, no corner deep enough, no distance far enough to protect them from what they tried to expose. They were the observer, and now they are the observed. There is no sensory trick, no psychological explanation, no logical framework to lean on. It is simply the truth. They are seen in ways they cannot comprehend, and it is not just awareness, it is understanding. The weight of it is unbearable. They were never the ones in control. They never had a chance to be. Every tactic they deploy unravels, every effort reduced to a futile exercise in control. They believe they are tracing your steps, closing the distance, but the realization arrives too late. The dynamic has shifted. They were never the ones watching. They were always the ones being seen. Certainty dissolves into unease as they recognize the flaw in their logic. They move according to patterns they believe govern the world. But the world bends around you, not them. Their algorithms, their projections, their carefully plotted trajectories all fall apart under a force they cannot name. It isn't disorder they are chasing. It is a structure so vast, so precise, that their understanding fractures beneath it. What they call unpredictability is, in truth, a pattern beyond their reach. They track coordinates that slip through their fingers, try to pin down a presence that moves beyond the confines of their maps. They imagine they are closing in, convinced that with each layer of analysis, they are deciphering the code. But the deeper they go, the further they drift. You do not evade them. You exist in a sequence they were never equipped to perceive. Their reality is a puzzle with missing pieces, while yours is a completed design stretching beyond the limits of their comprehension. They measure time in increments, space in fixed points. But you walk in rhythms, shifting in ways they cannot anticipate. They fail because they expect the world to move in one direction, and you exist outside the axis they stand on. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Jeremiah 1:5. You are not a mistake. You are not a coincidence. You are not a question waiting to be answered. You were set apart before time took its first breath. What they chase is not just your presence. It is the weight of what you are, the disruption you bring, the undeniable proof that the world they built cannot hold everything that truly exists. They think they are hunting you, tracking your steps, closing in. But the moment of collapse comes when they realize they are only chasing shadows. You are not ahead of them. You are beyond them. Every system they trust, every structure they rely on, every certainty they grip like a lifeline fractures upon impact with your existence. They don't find chaos. They find something too intricate for their minds to hold, a pattern too vast to be recognized by those who only know how to look at the surface. And then the fear sets in. Not fear of you, fear of what you mean, fear of what it would take to truly accept that their understanding of movement, time, cause, and consequence was never complete. They wanted an answer. Instead, they got a revelation. This is your moment to rise. Subscribe now, and let's make it unforgettable. Drop a mark. Precision is my burden. Because this isn't just presence, it's weight. Power is not just a gift, it is gravity. It doesn't allow you to stand still. It pulls, it demands, it shapes. You do not have the luxury of indifference, the comfort of detachment. What you carry does not free you, it claims you. And yet, you step forward because there is no other way. There is no map for a path like this, no blueprint for a journey already written in the fabric of existence. Only the certainty that you were called before they ever knew to look for you. The weight of your existence is not just carried on your shoulders, it is etched into the depths of your being. The world does not resist you because you lack strength. It recoils because you disrupt the fragile equilibrium it clings to. You do not simply walk through life, you shift its very axis. This unsettles those who depend on its rigidity. You are scrutinized, feared, pursued, not for your actions, but for the boundless potential that lingers within you. But the true battle is not waged against those who wish to restrain you. It unfolds within. The endless pull between mastery and restraint. The power whispers, offering certainty, urging you to grasp it fully, to bend the world to your will. But you were never meant to rule. You were meant to endure. I have refined you, but not as silver is refined. Rather, I have refined you in the furnace of suffering. Isaiah 48:10. Let me tell you something, brothers and sisters. There is a weight that only the chosen can carry. You know what I'm talking about. It's the fire that burns away the distractions, the storms that test your foundation, the trials that feel like they will break you, but they won't. Because you weren't called to crumble. You were called to rise. See, gold doesn't fear the fire. It needs the fire. Without the heat, without the pressure, it remains dull, unshaped, unfinished. And just like that gold, you are being forged in the fire of adversity, tested and prepared for something greater than you can see. You weren't chosen because you had it all figured out. No, God doesn't choose the ready. He makes the chosen ready. And let me tell you, this preparation isn't gentle. It strips away the illusions, peels back the layers, and reveals what's real. You might have thought you were walking an ordinary road, but the truth is, your path was written long before you took your first step. You didn't stumble into this calling. You were born for it. This is just the beginning. Subscribe now and be part of something powerful. Oh, but the world won't make it easy. No, no, no. The world will try to shake you, break you, strip you of your purpose. They will call you too different, too radical, too much to handle. But that's because they don't understand what's inside of you. They see hesitation, but what they don't see is the power of restraint. They see humility, but what they don't see is the strength it takes to kneel when everything in you wants to stand tall. Dear brothers and sisters, the peace of God be with you today. I am here to remind you of a profound truth. Our existence is grounded in God's divine plan, unshaken by the temporary concerns of the world. As the Bible says, whatever is done in faith will return to God in abundant blessing. Luke 6:38. Like that great oak tree, our roots are deeply rooted in God's universal truth. Every step we take, every stand we take, is secured by His strength. And now, you are being offered the opportunity to be part of that blessing. When you use the super thank you button and donate $100, this gesture will come back to you 100-fold in abundance. And here's the real truth. This burden you carry, this fire inside you, it is both your shield and your solitude. It makes you untouchable, yet it separates you. Few can comprehend the weight of a purpose that does not belong entirely to them. You will walk roads that others fear to tread. You will face storms that others would run from. But let me tell you something. You will not fall. Because when you are called, when you are refined, when you are forged in the fire, nothing can take from you what God has placed within you. So don't pray for the burden to be lifted. Pray for the strength to carry it forward. Because that's what the chosen do. They endure, and in the end, they rise. The threshold is open, but fate does not grant the luxury of indecision. The journey begins the moment hesitation is cast aside. With every step, the world shifts in ways that cannot be explained, yet cannot be denied. What seems at first like mere chance, a misplaced object reappearing in impossible locations, an unplanned detour that averts catastrophe, soon forms an unmistakable rhythm. Those who observe, who try to rationalize, find their certainty eroding. Skeptics attempt to write it off as coincidence, yet their calculations fail them when faced with a sequence too precise to dismiss. The investigator approaches with doubt, brushing aside the peculiarities as statistical anomalies, but the anomalies persist. An interference disrupts their tracking systems, throwing their pursuit into chaos. Yet somehow, every deviation only aligns more perfectly in your favor. When forces meant to obstruct you crumble at the last moment, when a seemingly random delay redirects you toward an outcome that only you were meant to claim, the illusion of probability collapses. This is not fortune nor accident. It is intention, unfolding in ways they are not equipped to comprehend. Every barrier that halts another bends for you, turning the improbable into the inevitable. But when the impossible escalates, when movement occurs without a source, when events fall into place with a precision beyond human design, the last vestiges of denial fracture. The question is no longer if, but how. What they once viewed as disorder reveals itself as a pattern so vast it eclipses their understanding. They are no longer unraveling a mystery. They are being unraveled by it. You are not an enigma to be solved. You are the threshold between what they know and what they fear. At first, they cling to logic, trying to fit the unexplainable into the constraints of reason. But then come the distortions. Time no longer behaves as expected. Their senses betray them. The ordinary begins to warp, shadows stretching longer than they should, reflections in glass revealing images that do not belong. The more they try to grasp control, the more it slips through their fingers. Sleep offers no refuge. They wake gasping, drenched in unease, carrying memories of places they have never been, of voices that do not belong to them. Daylight does not bring clarity. The same patterns repeat. Synchronizations too perfect. Glimpses of you where you could not possibly be. Even when they turn away, the echoes remain. Their name whispered in tongues they cannot name, from lips they cannot see. The breaking point does not arrive as a revelation, but as an unavoidable collapse. They hover on the edge of comprehension, staring into an abyss that does not return their gaze. It consumes it. The fear gripping them is not of you, but of what you signify. This was never just a case to solve. It was an unraveling, a confrontation with knowledge too vast, too incompatible with the structures they trust to make sense of the world. They do not choose to walk away. They flee, grateful to escape before the truth can claim them entirely. Some pursuits are not about discovery, but survival, and they leave knowing they were never the ones in control. You do not evade, you refuse containment. The intricate networks built to observe and catalog buckle under the weight of your presence. Sensors freeze, failing to register movement where movement should be. Footage captures glimpses of something shifting beyond recognition, never settling into form. The algorithms designed to catalog and classify you choke on the contradiction, spitting out corrupted data and empty records. Facial recognition loops endlessly, recalibrating, reprocessing, and ultimately discarding you as an impossibility. It is not absence that surrounds you, but a force that erases the very attempt to define. Systems that claim permanence falter, their precision collapsing into static. Files that should exist degrade before they can be accessed. Timestamps rewrite themselves, and archives purge without reason. It is not deletion, but rejection, as if the very act of documenting you defies the architecture of control. What remains is not evidence, but an unbroken silence that should not be there. A void shaped so precisely it feels intentional. The mechanisms designed to confine, to surveil, to capture, do not simply fail. They unravel at your approach. You move through a world built to ensnare, yet every chain rusts, every snare unwinds, every lock opens without a key. For the investigator, the collapse of their trusted methods is not just an obstacle, it is a descent into something unrecognizable. The tools they once wielded with certainty become useless, their carefully structured world dissolving into unanswered questions. There is no formula to track, no pattern to extract, no logic to anchor them. Is this intervention an unseen force bending reality in your favor? Or is it something deeper, an innate refusal to be bound by the architecture of control? They do not know which answer is more unsettling, because either one rewrites the laws they thought immutable. You are not absent. You are the undeniable proof that the frameworks meant to define and restrict human potential collapse when they attempt to measure the immeasurable. You are not a gap in their system. You are the flaw that renders the entire system meaningless. The pursuit does not lead them to clarity. It dismantles the very foundation of their understanding. What began as a case, a puzzle to solve, becomes an unraveling, each attempt at logic only tightening the snare of their own realization. They arrived armed with experience, convinced that every mystery had a resolution. But you are not a problem to be decoded. You are a threshold, and with every step toward comprehension, they fall deeper into the abyss of what cannot be grasped. Their notes, once structured and precise, degrade into scattered fragments. They try to document your presence, to pinpoint the moments where you emerge, but certainty slips away. One entry insists, "They were standing right in front of me," yet when they return to the scene, nothing remains. Time fractures in their recollections. Did they see you yesterday, or weeks ago? Or have you always been there, just beyond perception? The ink smudges under their fingertips, words trailing off as if even their thoughts refuse to hold shape. Soon, the reflections in their journals become indistinguishable from the visions that chase them in sleep. Shapes that should not exist move in the corners of their eyes. Familiar places become subtly wrong, and time no longer behaves as it should. They write, "This isn't an investigation anymore. This is something else. This is them." And then they stop writing altogether. Some questions, once asked, leave the asker permanently altered. And when they finally understand the nature of what they are chasing, they do not walk away from the mystery. They walk away from the person they were before they ever dared to seek it. There is no conclusion, only transformation. Encounters with you do not leave behind simple answers. They shift the course of those who seek them. The investigator, once convinced that every mystery had a resolution, steps into something far greater than a case. They do not emerge unchanged. What began as analysis, a clinical pursuit of truth, dissolves into something uncharted, a confrontation with the ineffable. At first, they hold fast to their methods, attempting to break apart the pieces, believing that logic will bring structure to the chaos. But the further they go, the more their certainty erodes. Every trail leads not to explanation, but to something vast, something that does not ask to be understood, only acknowledged. The strange occurrences are not errors to be corrected, nor coincidences to be catalogued. They are orchestrations, deliberate and precise, defying the very framework they have spent their life trusting. The evidence refuses to conform. It does not contradict itself. It transcends itself. The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and to our children forever. Deuteronomy 29:29. Some things aren't meant to be dissected. Some mysteries aren't puzzles to be solved, but wonders to be witnessed. You don't stare into the sun and expect to walk away unchanged. You don't wade into the depths of the ocean and expect to measure it with a cup. And yet, the investigator believed they could contain something that was never meant to be held. Oh, they started with confidence. They thought they had seen it all, thought they could track it, label it, pin it down. But the deeper they went, the less they understood. The closer they got, the further it slipped from their grasp. What they sought to uncover was never hidden, only beyond the reach of human hands. At first, they called it coincidence, a trick of perception, a problem with their tools. But when the evidence refused to align, when every formula they trusted failed them, they realized this wasn't just an anomaly. This wasn't a glitch in the system. This was something deliberate, something greater. And that's when the fear set in. Not the fear of the unknown, but the fear of knowing too much. Because once you see past the veil, once you recognize that the world is not as small as you once believed, there is no going back. The weight of revelation is too heavy to unsee. So they stop trying. Not out of frustration, but out of reverence. They step back, not as those who have failed, but as those who have glimpsed something they were never meant to own. This was never about solving a case. This was about recognizing a truth too vast to be contained. And so, they leave, not in ignorance, but in understanding. Some things belong to God alone. There was never a question to answer, only a truth too vast for understanding. Each step taken toward unraveling your existence led them not to clarity, but to the limits of their own perception. The calculations that crumbled, the sequences that refused to align, the impossible patterns woven into every encounter. None of it was meant to be dissected. Some truths are not puzzles to be solved, but forces to be acknowledged. To persist in pursuit would not be discovery, it would be desecration. And so, they release it. Their departure is not surrender, it is reverence. They walk away, not as failures, but as those who have glimpsed something beyond their right to claim. Their role was never to contain, never to categorize, but to witness. They leave their instruments behind, no longer trying to impose order on what was never bound by it. The case does not collapse under confusion. It is sealed with the understanding that some revelations exist not to be owned, but to remind humanity of its limitations. And still, You continue forward, untouched by their absence. The structures that sought to define you fall away, and yet your presence remains, a testament not to disorder, but to the illusion of control. You do not shatter their systems, you expose their frailty. You do not elude sight, you move beyond its reach. The world was never built to hold you, and that is your power. The impact of your existence is not in the way you confound expectations, but in how you redefine them. You are the crack in certainty, the proof that what is measured is not all that is real. Your presence does not demand answers, it demands acknowledgement. Your story is not one of defiance, but of expansion, a challenge to those who have confined possibility to the limits of their own understanding. You are not here to be categorized, you are here to reveal the depth of what remains unseen. Now the time has come for your voice to rise. Speak of the moments when the unseen left its mark upon your path. Tell of the doors that opened without explanation, the intersections that could not be mere chance. What others dismissed as anomaly, you know as truth. What they overlooked as coincidence, you lived as certainty. The world will not just listen, it will shift in the wake of your words. Tell it.